Welcome back for day 26 of 31 monsters in 31 days. Let's find out who we're making today. We are making a zombie. All right, let's get started.
While we're sketching out the plan and making the basic blob shape that all of the monsters in this series are built off of, I'm going to give you a bit of a history of zombies and why I included them on my monster list. If you want to see slower, step-by-step instructions on how to make this basic blob form, check out this video. For details on how I do my paper mache, check out this video. Both are linked in the description. The concept of zombies as we know them in pop culture can be traced back to Caribbean and especially Haitian folklore. In the 17th century, enslaved West African people were brought to work on Haiti's sugarcane plantations. The zombie folklore that evolved in these peoples may have developed as a response to the trauma of enslavement. The idea of being trapped in one's body, forced to work without will, even after death, reflected the horrors of slavery and the enslaved people's loss of autonomy and human identity. Zombie stories traveled to the US in the early 20th century as American travelers learned more about Haitian folklore and the voodoo religion. The modern idea of the undead zombie biting and spreading a virus to create hordes of the undead was popularized by George A. Romero's 1968 independent horror film Night of the Living Dead. Since then, the entire genre of zombie media, from Dawn of the Dead to The Walking Dead, have adopted Romero's version of the zombies as standard lore. Since then, zombies have been a near constant present in movies, TV, and video games. With zombies being creatures that are not living but not dead, they are a natural fit for Halloween, a holiday that has always celebrated the space between life and death. Zombies have both a history in classic horror and modern pop culture appeal, and for that reason, I had to include them on my monster list. I want to make it look like there's a hole in our zombie's head and that you can see some of his brains in there. So to do that, I've got to carve out part of the top of this blob. After marking the area I want to remove, I'm using a craft knife to cut through the paper mache so I can peel off the hard top layers and remove some of the newspaper stuffing. I'll then use some paper mache to close over that hole. My next step is to make the zombie's teeth and eyeballs. I'll need those to dry before I can add them to his face. I'm sculpting these bits with DOS air dry clay. This is my favorite air dry clay. I'll leave a link for this clay and my other supplies in the video description. I'm sculpting eyes by rolling a ball of clay between my hands, then flattening it on the table to make a little button shape. I'm making a bunch of rectangular teeth by pinching some clay between my fingers. I'll make a whole bunch and then set these aside to dry. I'm also going to use some air dry clay to make our zombie's brains. I'm pushing some foil into his head cavity because I don't want the clay to stick to the paper mache yet. I'm starting with a cookie shaped clay as a bit of a base, and then I'm using long snakes of clay to make his brains. I'm using white glue to attach the snakes to the base. This only works because this clay has a lot of paper fiber in it. You can't use glue with every kind of air dry clay. When the brain is all done, I'll set this aside to dry, and then after the clay is set up a bit, I'll lift the brain bit out of the head cavity and pull the foil off so that the clay can dry faster from both sides. Here are the eyes and teeth dried. I'm going to give the eyeballs a light sanding with these nail files I like. They'll be linked in the supply list in the description. I like to take the extra step of sanding these down because eyes are the first places people will look when they see this sculpture. So I want them to be really smooth. If you're going to do this for yourself, don't forget to protect your lungs while sanding. Before I attach eyeballs, I want to carve out a little nasal cavity where our poor zombie's nose has rotted off. I'll use a bead of hot glue to build up some cartilage over the hole I just cut, and we'll cover all that in some small bits of paper mache. Now I'm hot gluing on the eyeballs and giving them a base coat of white paint. I'll give him some green irises and some mismatched pupils, and then maybe that eye on the right is a little bit more damaged, so I'll paint some capillaries in and add a bit of green mold, and then I'll dry brush a bit of blue around each eyeball to make them look extra spooky. Finally, when the paint is dry, I'm going to give the eyeballs a protective coat of glossy UV resin. The brain is dry now, so we're going to hot glue that in place so we can paint it now too. I'm going to give the brain an all-over base coat in this lavender gray color. When that's dry, I'm using my finger to tap some bright pink onto the top of his brain ridges. When the paint is dry, I'm scraping a bit of red and a tiny pinch of black chalk pastel into a cup, and then mixing that powder with some of my resin. I'll pour this concoction all over my zombie's brain and work it into the ridges. After fully curing the resin, I gotta say I'm super happy with how this brain turned out. Here's how our zombie is looking now. Let's lay him down and give him a mouth. I'm going to paint the inside of his mouth area black. It's way easier to do it now than to try to fit a paintbrush inside his mouth later, so we're going to take care of that. I'm going to use some air dry clay to make his gums. I'm mixing some green acrylic paint in to try to tint my clay green. This didn't really work that well. I've done this much more successfully with food coloring before. If you want to give this a try, you might want to do some experimenting before you give it a go. I'm gluing a big snake of clay to his face with some white glue and then smoothing the top edge into the blob. I'm leaving the bottom edge of the snake as is, and I'm putting a bit of white glue onto the base of each tooth that I prepped earlier, and I'm shoving it into those gums. I'm using a similar technique to make the bottom row of teeth before setting this aside to dry. I had it drying upstairs on an air vent while I was doing some other work, and every time I walked past this thing, I hated it more and more. I just think his teeth and mouth are far too big here, so I'm peeling it all off before it can dry. Off camera, I covered the old mouth spot with some paper mache, so we now have a fresh new canvas to work with. Unfortunately, at this point, I don't have time to make new teeth out of air dry clay and wait for them to dry, so I'm using some oven baked clay this time. I know oven baked clay isn't an option for everybody, but if you have more time, air dry clay works just as well. I placed a bit of foil onto the sculpture so I can make my zombie's mouth without it sticking to the paper mache. I'm obviously not going to stick this whole sculpture in the oven, so I need the mouth to be removable so I can bake it. I'm using a small snake of green clay to make his upper gums. You know, this is going to be the same as I did it with the air dry clay, just much smaller. And then instead of white glue on the bottom of each tooth, I'm using some oven baked clay adhesive. So once I've got the teeth and gums looking how I like, I'm going to bake this on this bit of aluminum foil. And you can see the foil will keep the clay in the appropriate curve to fit on the blob after the clay is cured. After baking and cooling the teeth and gums, I'm sticking them onto the mouth spot with some carefully placed hot glue. Yes, this smaller mouth was the right call. This looks so much better. So now we can make the rest of his face. I'm starting with lips. I'm making these by twisting up a little scrap of paper towel and folding it in some glue-covered paper like a little taco. Starting with the bottom lip, I'll wrap that onto his face. Then I'll repeat the process for the top lip and blend the edges into the sculpture with some small bits of paper mache. I'm going to use some more folded paper to wrap around the bottom and top of each eyeball. I imagine that his eyelids are mostly rotted off, so I'm not covering much of the eyeballs here. I want to add some sagging wrinkles under his eyes, so I'm taking some gluey paper and scrunching it up to make some folds and wrinkles. And I'm putting that onto his eye and blending in the edges. I'm also putting some wrinkly paper bits by his scalp opening. I'm using some cardboard to make some ears. And I'm hot gluing them onto his head. I've cut a chunk off of this one ear here. This side of his head has obviously taken some serious damage. I'm covering the ears with some paper mache, and now we can set him aside to dry before paint and hair. While that zombie's drying, I just wanted to say a quick thanks to everyone who supported me taking a couple days off. If you didn't notice or you don't know what I'm talking about, this is day 26 of my monster series, but I'm actually posting this video on the 29th of October. So I'm a couple days behind, but I had been working 16-hour days, 7 days a week since at least Thanksgiving. And a couple days ago, my body just said no more. So I had to take a couple days off, which everyone was really supportive of that. And I'm feeling a heck of a lot better. But I've also had to come to terms with the fact that there's just no physical way I will be able to finish 31 monsters by Halloween. And I'm okay with that. I know I worked absolutely as hard as I could. I'm definitely going to finish all 31 monsters, but I'm going to give myself a few extra days to do it. And, you know, of course, I'm a little bummed that I couldn't hit my goal, but it was just
too much work if I'm being honest with myself, but I've only got 5 more monsters to finish after this zombie, and I'm gonna give myself until November 4th to do it. So it'll be 31 monsters in like 35 days, which is still pretty kick-ass. But thanks for being here. Thanks for understanding. And thanks for all the kind comments and messages encouraging me to take care of my well-being. I'm feeling much better now. I've got 5 monsters left, and I hope you'll stick around and watch them, even though they're going a few days into November.
All right, let's paint this guy. I'm mixing up this slightly greenish gray color and applying it all over with a makeup sponge. When that's dry, I'm going to apply this purple wash. This is a dilute acrylic paint I'm slapping on with a soft brush and then wiping it back with a damp paper towel. The wash collects in all the wrinkles of the sculpture and really enhances the texture. I'm not liking how the purple wash left like a purple haze over everything, so I went back in and brightened up the green with my sponge again. Finally, just to bring in a bit of vibrance, I'm dabbing a translucent yellow to highlight his eyes, mouth, and ears. Now I'm hot gluing some strips of faux fur onto his head for hair. Then I'm giving him a little trim. I'm putting a smudge of red paint onto his hair under his brain and then also on top of his cut ear. I also mixed together some glue, water, and brown paint, and I'm using my fingertips to put a good amount of that throughout his hair to make it dirty and matted. As always, I'm gluing some black felt onto the bottom of the sculpture as a final finishing touch. And here's our finished zombie. I freaking love how he turned out. I'm so glad I took the time to redo his mouth because this might be my new favorite from the series. Let me know what you think of him in the comments, and please hit the like button if you think I did a good job. Since I'm a smaller channel, anytime you like or comment, it really helps me out because it tells YouTube this video is worth watching. And I've been working really hard on this series, so I would love for tons of people to see it. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss tomorrow's video. You can join my Patreon if you want to watch ad-free. And again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.